Hi, I am Thea, and I am with Sipping N Painting Hampden. And today we are going to paint a acrylic painting together here in my studio. So I have with me 2 jars of water, a board for painting on, and this is just a canvas-covered flat piece of cardboard. I have a little stand-up easel here, although if you're not presenting this, you don't even need an easel. You could do this flat on a table. And this is the painting that we're going to be doing. This is called Dancing Tree. This is one of the paintings we teach at Sipping N Painting Hampden, but we're going to do it today from my home studio. I also have with me here a big brush, big flat brush that's about 1 inch across, a medium-sized brush, which is about a 1/2 inch across, and also flat, and then a small round brush. And these are just long-handled nylon brushes. They can be gotten at any craft store. And so I also have with me a palette full of acrylic paint. Acrylic is paint that you can thin with water, and these I got out of tubes. Let me show you that. I set them up already, but I just have a set of tubes of acrylic paint, and I set them up on, this is palette paper. I don't know if you can see that. It's real thin palette paper, and you don't even need something that fancy though. You could just get a plate, just don't eat off that plate, and you can set up your paint on there. I did use acrylics from tubes, which are a little heavier body. They have a little bit, I don't know if you can see, they sort of stand up because they're a little bit thicker, as opposed to acrylic paints that you can pump from a dispenser that might be a little bit waterier. Either one will work. So you just have to find materials that you can have fun with. So, and I also have a, this is an old t-shirt for just wiping my brushes off on. You always need, you could use a paper towel, some napkins that you have around, just something to blot your brushes on as you're painting, because with acrylic paint we're always trying to control the amount of paint and water on the brush as we paint. So I'm going to paint this painting called Dancing Tree, and I chose this one because it's really fun and easy, and you can really go in any direction with it and be really creative and have a lot of fun with it. So I wanted to show you that to start. I'm going to set this aside over here where I can see it. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it in the video. I'm just going to have that as reference. I want you to know that when painters and artists paint things, we don't come out often with the idea fully formed in our mind. It's often something we've sketched and thought of ahead of time and worked up, and then you gradually build it into a final piece. So don't think that there's just like pure genius coming out of my head making this painting. That's not the case. This painting we had painted ahead of time and perfected, and now I'm going to demonstrate it for you here. So but this is one you can really, it's open-ended and you can really have fun with it. So the first thing I'm going to do, hiding behind here are my water jars. I use 2 water jars just because that way you don't have to keep getting up and getting fresh water. You can go from jar to jar, and then your brushes will be really clean. But I'm going to start out by wetting that big brush, and with acrylic paints we work background to foreground because acrylic paint layers on itself. So in this background, for this painting, it's really colorful, and I chose for my palette all the colors of the rainbow, and I'm going to get started using the lightest color and working lighter to darker with my rainbow colors. So I'm going to start with that yellow paint, and I'm just mixing my brush fresh out of the water jar into the yellow paint, and I'm going to come up here on my background and make just a few spots of yellow paint here and there. Oh, and by the way, I'm wearing a smock. Always a good idea. You could have painting clothes. I do have painting clothes, but for this video I went super fancy for you, and I just wore my smock. You can just use I have an old sweatsuit that I've used for years, and none of this is truly fancy. I want you to know that. The table that I'm painting on, my friend rescued from somebody's trash bin for me, and I repurposed it and I've been using it for years. So you don't need to go super fancy with your painting. So I started out with just yellow paint mixed with a little bit of water on my big brush, and now I'm swishing that brush around on the water jar, and I'm gonna, well, I don't even need to blot it on the paper towel. I'm gonna go right to the orange because I still want that paint to be pretty wet, and I'm mixing around that water with the orange, and I'm gonna make a few spots of orange on my background, and I'm mixing that right in with my yellow. I'm overlapping some of those yellow spots there, and we're going real random with this background here. And I'm starting with the lighter colors first. Now I don't want this background to get too dark on me in terms of value. So if you think of value as the continuum of light to dark, I want to keep this in either the mid-range value to the lighter side, because I'm going to make my tree in the foreground, my little curly tree there, and I want that to be the dominant element. So I want that to be darker than my whole background. So if my colors start to get dark, then I'm going to mix a little bit of white in them. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm swishing that big brush around in the water jar, and I'm going to go with a little bit of green, and this time I'm going to mix it with a little bit of white on my palette there, because I want it to be a light green. And I'm overlapping my areas of orange and yellow on the edges with that green. And by overlapping them while they're still wet, we're getting a blend in our color there. And so we get a nice blended, interesting background. And you can see it's dripping a little bit here, and I'm not real concerned with that. I'm just making a nice, interesting background, and I'm skipping around to different parts of this background to just spread the color all over the board. So now I'm going to clean that brush once again and mix a little bit of white on the brush to start, picking up the white paint, and then a little bit of the blue paint. And the reason why I started with the white is because you'll find that the dark colors, you don't need very much of them, because they're very dominant and they'll take over. So you start with the lighter color first and you mix the darker in with it, because you'll just need very little. So I took the corner of the brush, mixed that in with the blue, and now I'm going to add the white and blue mixed together, so a light blue, in over my orange, green, yellow background. And my colors are still wet back there, so I'm getting a little bit of a blend in there too. Now the yellow is starting to dry, so that when I go over the edges of that yellow paint, I'm not getting as much of a blend in there. If I want to blend that, I have to make sure to clean this brush off really well and pick up that yellow paint again. And this time I'm going to mix a little bit of white with that yellow too. I want the white acts as kind of a primer, and so I want that white to have heavier coating, so the white will help me cover over my other colors a little bit better. So I'm going to go in with some of those edges with white mixed with yellow, and you can see I get a little bit more of a blend. And if it starts to get muddy, if my colors mix too much, in other words, I'm going to clean off that brush by swishing it around in the water jar and blotting it on the paper towel, and now I just have a damp brush that I can use to blend too. Now here, I can't stress enough that you don't need very much paint when you paint. I think that a lot of times beginners to painting, it's really appealing to play with paint, and so you choose a lot of it. But you don't need very much of it, and actually it'll save you money in the long run if you don't buy too much materials, and it's just not even necessary. So let's see, I have orange, yellow, green, blue, and I'm going to go with a little bit of purple in this background too. So dipping that big brush in the water jar, picking up white paint to start, and then I'm going to mix that around with the purple paint. And just mixing that back and forth, kind of going in a back and forth direction with my brush. And, ooh, that's dark. See, if you put that on there and you say, whoa, way too dark, make sure then you clean the brush off. And now I'm going to just pick up some white again. I'm going to start with more white. Like I said, those darker colors are pretty dominant and they'll take over. So if we start with white again, then we can get a much more lavender shade. We don't want that too dark. And I'm just filling in the rest of the blanks where I have empty canvas there. And here again with the canvas, sometimes you'll see stretched canvases. In other words, they're stretched over bars of wood. But this is just canvas that's been sort of pasted onto cardboard, and I really like these because then you can make a ton of paintings and have them around, and you don't need a whole lot of storage space. They're just flat, and they store flat, but if you love it, you can frame it up and hang it on the wall too, so it works both ways. So now I just have a couple little blank spots that I'm filling in with some other color here. I just picked up what was on my palette here, a little bit of orange. And I like that crazy orange purple color, so I'm going to fill that in there. Here, I think that's a rough transition between the blue and the yellow, so I cleaned off the brush really well, and I'm going to pick up some white paint and some yellow paint and just go over that little edge there and smooth out that transition. And here again, swishing that brush around on the water jar, wiping it on the my old t-shirt to get it clean, and then I'm going to just come with a damp brush and smooth that out. And you can even finger paint. By the way, I'm wearing gloves because, believe it or not, even though I'm an artist, I don't like to get painty. I wear gloves, but you don't have to. Acrylic paint is, you can clean it off with soap and water, so you don't even have to wear gloves. That's just my personal preference. So now we have this whole background filled in with a nice sort of variety of colors, and this painting you can just go wild. You can either limit the palette in the background to a couple colors, like maybe you want to do a red-orange background or a red-orange-yellow background or something like that. But just whatever background you choose, remember to keep it on the lighter side of the value scale. So if value is light to dark, again, if you think of the light side of the scale being pure white and the dark side being pure black, somewhere in the middle is a gray, so you want a middle value to the very light side for this background, because now we want to paint a tree over the foreground, and we want that to be darker and more dominant so that it appears to pop forward in our composition, or pop forward on the page. So now I'm going to switch brushes. I just left this big brush in the water jar, and the reason why I do that is because acrylic paint is a plastic base, and you don't want it to dry out on your brushes because it'll dry solid and it'll ruin the brushes. So just leave them in the water jar sitting until you're done painting for the day, and then you can wash them all together at the same time. But now I'm going to pick up this medium-sized brush and wet that to start, and let's make a curly little tree. Now, I picked this nice, fun, curly tree because it is a real simple, you can do anything with it. It's not obviously looking like a real tree from nature, so you can go wild with it. But there is sort of a basic set of rules I want to stick with while I'm making my tree, and that is that keep in mind trees are widest from the point at which they start growing. So they're widest at the roots, and they get narrower and skinnier as they move away from that point of growth. So I'm going to start at the bottom with my medium-sized brush, which I loaded up with some brown paint. The fancy name for it's burnt sienna, but we'll just call it brown. And I'm not going to start it right in the middle. I'm going to start it slightly off to the right-hand side just to make it a really interesting kind of tree on the page. I don't want it right in the middle. That'll kind of make it a very static looking composition. If I make it a little off center, it'll give it a little bit of, I don't know, dancing room. So I'm going to start that tree to the right of center, and I'm going to start it at the roots where it will be the widest, and I'm going to go up. And as I move up away from that point of growth, and I think I need a little more water on that brush mixed with my brown paint because it's looking a little bit dry. I don't know if you can see there. Sometimes if the paint looks a little bit dry, it gets, it picks up the canvas texture, and that's not pleasant to paint with. You want it to feel smooth and flow for you. So I got a little bit more water in that brown, and now I'm going to go up and get skinnier as I move up, and I'm also going to curve this tree around. So let me make a wiggle, kind of an S-shaped wiggle there. A little bit more water, a little bit more brown, S-shaped wiggle. And also, as I move up, I'm twisting the brush a little bit around in my fingers because I have this flat brush, and I'm lifting the brush up and off to get that real pointy top. But if that's too difficult, you don't even have to do, it doesn't even have to be that complicated. You can also take this little skinny round brush, which will give you a little more hand control, and you can build your tree with that. So I can add branches with that little skinny round brush, and anytime a branch comes off of the main trunk, I just want it to be either as wide as that trunk at that point and then get skinnier as it moves away from it. Or, let's see, what was I going to say? Oh, I lost track of that. But these are just curly, fun branches. The most important rule to remember is where it connects to the main trunk, it can't be wider than that trunk. It has to be a little bit skinnier. It can be as fat as the main trunk, or a little bit skinnier as it moves away from the point of growth. So I am curling those fun little branches around, and I just keep having to add water to this paint. And I did choose, see if it gets too watery, you'll get drips. But that's okay. You can finger paint, pick them up, or you could blot them with your paper. That's another way to go. Don't worry about acrylic. If it's always fixable if you get little bobbles like that. But I'm just gonna make a whole bunch of little twirly branches, and these are what do you call those? Spirals. Making little spiral tree branches coming off of my main trunk, and I'm just having fun with this and making them come off of that main trunk. When I break off branches for real trees, oh, see this mistake here? Let's make this into not a mistake. Well, just make another branch. Ha, I meant it that way. Pure genius, right? When you make branches that come off trees, I always think of breaking them off in sort of Y shapes and V shapes. I don't know if you can see that as I come off of that. There's a little V shape as I come off of that trunk. That's how I kind of think of building up my tree. And here, this does not have to look real, so you can play with it and have fun with that. So now once I have a bunch of branches, and let's go with a few more. We'll curve one down around there. I'm going to go with an odd number. I like to work with odd numbers in art. Don't ask me why. I think it makes the composition, well, you can ask me why. I think it makes the compositions more interesting if you work with odd numbers. Remember to keep the branches wider where they grow, and they get skinnier as they move out away from that point of growth. So when you get to the end of the twig, it's the pointy end. And if I was spending a whole lot of time on there, I could really smooth them out, but we're just doing a short demonstration today. So I'm leaving these a little bit on the messier side. But you can neaten this up. You can spend all afternoon painting and just have a nice casual painty afternoon. And I'm going to add one more little curly branch up here. So what do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I love that. So let's just stick with that, because that'll fill up my brightly colored sky. And then I cleaned that little skinny brush by swishing it around on the water jar, and I'm blotting on the paper towel. Now we have our basic tree there. We can add some fun leaves. And in this picture that we are working from, we just have a lot of leaves that are kind of dancing all around those branches. They're not even really connected. They're not even overlapping on this sample. So it's totally up to you how you want to make your little leaves. I'm feeling the purple today, so I'm going to pick up white paint with my little skinny brush and mix that around with my purple paint till I get a nice lavender color. And here I can go a little darker than the lavender in the background, since we want our tree to stand out and kind of pop into the foreground. And I'm going to make some leaves there with my little skinny brush. And you can make these leaves shaped like almonds, like your eye, you know, that where they're pointy at the end and rounded in the middle. Or there's two different kinds of leaves on here on this sample. And here again, I'm not very neat with them. There's also just plain dots. So you can just dot those on there with the tip of the brush. I loaded the little skinny brush up with purple paint. Now I'm just touching the tip of the brush and kind of wiggling it a little bit to get a dot. So that's another option on those leaves. And when I make my leaves, I just want to scatter them all around my tree. And when you make art, just make sure you're always continually standing back from it and taking the whole thing in. You are taking the whole thing in this video because you're seeing it from the spectator's point of view. But when you're the artist, you're often sitting right next to the piece of work. But remember to get up like the viewer views your art from many feet away. They're going to be relaxing on your couch and looking up over your fireplace and gazing at your art. And remember, that's from many feet away. So you want to get away from it as you paint it as well. And you can make these little almond-shaped leaves all over the place. Or come in and make some dot, 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 dot. And another thing that makes art attractive is a little bit of randomness. So make some of those dots grouped and make some single. Kind of keep it random. Make different numbers of grouping. There's a group of 5, there's a group of 3, then we got some singles. Oh, let's give that one a partner. And you don't even have to make all your leaves the same color. I'm going to swish that brush around in the water jar, pick up a little bit more white and mix it with some blue and make some blue leaves. I'm feeling the blue now. So I'm going to do some blue leaves with my little skinny brush. And here again, they're shaped like little almonds so that they're pointy at the end or pointy at the ends and rounded in the middle. Is that what I said? That's what I said. And by the way, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to our channel, and you can hit the like button, and you can also leave some comments for us as well, and tell us how you did with your painting. And you can also, I'll put my Venmo link, and you can tip me on Venmo if you feel so inclined. We'll put that beneath the video. So right now I'm just making lots of little blue leaves, and I'm making these going in all different directions. Some of them are tipping diagonal up to the upper right, and some of them are laying down, moving off to the left there. We just want to kind of randomize it, and I'm going to make some dots too. Want some dots. And by the way, there's also a fun, we do this at Sipping N Painting Hampden. I sometimes use the back of the brush, and I'm dipping the tip of the handle into the paint. I'm going to roll that around, and you can use that to make dots too. That's kind of a fun technique. So there's more than one way to do that, or you could use the hairy side of the brush, the bristles. You can make those, they'll make a little bit bigger dots. It's up to you. It's fun to experiment, and that's what we're here to do, have fun. So I'm mixing some blue dots in among my purple dots. And I got a nice cheerful little curly tree there today. And if you have more time, you can spend time perfecting that tree. I can add a little bit of, I'm going to mix a little bit of black in with the blue and come up and make a little accent on my trunk there with on a couple of those branches. That's kind of a little variation you could put in there, make that stand out a little bit more. Or you could keep it brown. It's up to you. Here's that mix with a little bit of brown. But I wanted to be faithful to my sample, and it has a little bit of accent color and a little bit of darker color mixed in with some of those branches. And that'll really make that tree pop into the foreground there. Just adding a little bit of black paint in over that brown here and there. And I'm gonna, the last thing I'm gonna do, just fix up my little, whoop. I'm gonna have to make another leaf there if I keep dripping. It wants to drip on that part of the painting today. I'm going to just fix that little transition was a little rough there. But then, haha, I'm going to have to make another branch because I made more drips. See, nobody will know. They'll think I meant it that way. Oh yeah, I meant it that way. Painting, it's your painting, and you can do it any way you want. I'm going to put a couple little leaves there, and it'll be like I planned it the whole time. So I skipped around using a little bit of blue, making some blue leaves, a little bit of purple, making some purple leaves over my nice light colored background, and I have a dancing tree. And I hope that you try this at home and make your own dancing tree. And I am Thea, and I thank you for joining me today from my studio for Sipping and Painting Hampden. So thank you for painting with me today.